I bring Sutekh's gift of death to all humanity. Evil, your evil is my good. I am Sutekh the Destroyer. Where I tread, I leave nothing but dust and darkness. I find that good. You pit your puny will against mine. Kneel, kneel before the might of Sutekh. In my presence you are an ant, a termite. Abase yourself, you grovelling insect. I am Sutekh the Destroyer, and in this video I am going to be sharing with you some true facts about the making of pyramids of Mars. Yes. Pyramids of Mars is largely regarded as one of the best Doctor Who stories ever to have been produced. Well, that's unsurprising considering it features me. Many fans will fondly recall my performance, which was otherwise limited due to the fact that I was wearing a large masked helmet and was paralyzed for the majority of the story. That meant that much of my performance had to come from the voice, that memorable whispering voice. As a result, many people have compared me with the actor Gabriel Wolf. Personally, I don't hear the resemblance. But anyway, without further ado, here are some true facts about pyramids of Mars. May this inform you and chill you to the core. I bring Sutekh's gift of facts to all Doctor Who fans. Pyramids of Mars was the third story to be broadcast as part of Season 13. Season 13, of course, was the second year to feature Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor, as well as Robert Holmes as script editor and Philip Hinchcliffe as producer. As a result, their influence can be felt very strongly in the gothic horror elements that feature throughout the season. This season was also the third year to feature Elizabeth Sladen as companion Sarah Jane Smith. Some might say that this is the Doctor and Sarah at the height of their powers. Their powers, of course, insignificant to the greatest of all the Osirans. The story was directed by Paddy Russell, who sadly passed away in late 2017. She directed several Doctor Who stories and was one of only a handful of female directors in the classic series. Her final contribution would be Horror of Fangrog, another Fourth Doctor adventure, only this time featuring Leela as played by Louise Jameson instead of Sarah Jane Smith. The story takes place mostly in England in the year 1911. However, for the last episode, the story moves to the titular Pyramid of Mars. Although the title of the story is Pyramids of Mars plural, only one pyramid in fact features. Even then, we never see the exterior of the pyramid, so you have only my word that it is indeed shaped as such. No reference has been made to the pyramids of Mars since. This is the 82nd complete serial to be produced for Doctor Who, and the story consists of 4 25-minute episodes. It was broadcast between the 25th of October and the 15th of November, 1975, the optimum time for Doctor Who to be broadcast, across Halloween and Bonfire Night. The writing credit for the story on the screen is attributed to one Stephen Harris. However, this is a pseudonym. Stephen Harris does not exist. The story was in fact originally drafted by writer Louis Griefer. However, after his first drafts were submitted, his story as it stood was deemed unworkable. Louis Griefer was invited to return to rewrite his scripts, however by this point had become unavailable. It was down to Robert Holmes to rework and rewrite the scripts for television production. As a result, Holmes did the bulk of the writing work. However, due to BBC rules, he could not be credited as both writer and script editor. So he deployed the pseudonym Stephen Harris. The reason for this being is that it was generally frowned upon for script editors to also write for the series that they were script editing. It was considered putting a writer out of a job. Technically, the credit should read Pyramids of Mars by Robert Holmes, from a story by Louis Griefer. However, that would take too much room on the caption card. Aside from Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen, there are several actors making a return appearance in Doctor Who, albeit playing different characters. The first of these is Professor Marcus Scarman, the man who discovered me in my tomb beneath the pyramid in Egypt. I made him my puppet. He was played by Bernard Archard. His previous appearance was in Patrick Troughton's debut appearance as the second Doctor in Power of the Daleks, as mutinous colony leader Bragan, who stages a coup to take full control of the colony and fails. Despite being a very serious guest actor, and also playing 2 very strong villainous roles, Archard remembers his roles very fondly. As evidence of this, there is a photograph of the Priory set interior from in between scenes of shooting. On one side you can see a desk as part of the set dressing, and at that desk is Bernard Archard himself, wearing a pair of very thick-rimmed spectacles. He can be seen reading a newspaper, presumably filling in the Times crossword, a very popular pastime on the Doctor Who set. So clearly Archard was enjoying his experience in Doctor Who, rather than taking the money and running back to his dressing room. The Times crossword, however, is nothing more than a childish stratagem. Also returning as Marcus Scarman's brother Lawrence is actor Michael Sheard. He makes far too many appearances in Doctor Who to mention, but his earliest was in a story called The Mind of Evil. Yes, The Mind of Evil, to rival my own. His last television appearance in Doctor Who was in Remembrance of the Daleks, as the head teacher of Coal Hill School. He made one subsequent appearance in Doctor Who for Big Finish Audio. He appeared in The Stones of Venice with 8th Doctor Paul McGann. Sadly, he did not make any further contributions, as he died not long after. But to many, he is probably most fondly remembered for his role in Grange Hill, the popular children's TV drama. Also on the production team is a familiar name, Peter Grimwade. He would become best known later as a writer and director of several notable stories. First, his directing credits are Full Circle, Logopolis, Kinder, and Earthshock. He did gather a reputation as a rather strict director. However, the stories he worked on are largely regarded as some of the best. So, despite being strict, he clearly gathered results. He wrote 3 television stories in total, one for each year of the 5th Doctor's tenure. The first of which was Time Flight, not highly regarded within fan circles, but nevertheless this was his first foray into script writing for Doctor Who. He factored in what he learned into his next contribution, Mordrin Undead, the first story in the Black Guardian trilogy, but also notable for reintroducing the character of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. His final contribution to the television series was the serial Planet of Fire, the penultimate Peter Davison story. He would have no further involvement in the television series. However, he was asked to novelize his scripts for Target Books. The editor of the range remembers Grimwade fondly, due to the fact that his novelizations were always submitted on time and within the given word count, and generally required very little amendment or interference. That certainly made his life a lot easier. Long-term fans of the series will pick up on the nod in one of the early scenes. Sarah Jane Smith emerges from the TARDIS wardrobe, wearing a Victorian-era dress. This is incongruous due to the fact that the TARDIS is en route to the year 1980, and would only land in 1911 as a result of being drawn off course by my influence. However, dressed for the occasion, the Doctor, immediately prior to giving his hideously pompous "I am a Time Lord, I walk in eternity" speech, although worthy of myself, he attributes the dress to previous companion Victoria Waterfield. It is doubtful that it is indeed the same costume, not least due to the fact that Deborah Watling, who played Victoria, is considerably smaller than Elizabeth Sladen. Also consider that patchy documentation records make it very hard to track down costumes used from the 1960s. Presently, it would doubtless have been a similar case in 1975. But given that most of black and white Doctor Who by that time had been wiped anyway, there was very little visual reference for the production team to use, never mind fans, as not even Doctor Who magazine had launched at that time. As such, the production team could easily get away with using a similar, if not identical, dress. It is difficult, however, to be as forgiving of the Doctor's description of the Osiran race. He describes us as having dome-shaped heads and cerebrums like spiral staircases. When the TARDIS lurches out of control, Sarah Jane Smith sees a vision of an Osiran, possibly myself, against the wall in the TARDIS. This does not match the description given by the Doctor later in the story, as it looks far more like an Egyptian depiction of a jackal. Talking of inconsistencies with the Osirians, in scripts and subsequent documents, the Osirians are occasionally referred to as Osirians. An extra I is added before the A. However, it is consistently pronounced Osiron throughout the story. However, in the Target novelization, the word Osirians is used. This is especially incongruous, considering that Tom Baker narrates the audiobook using the pronunciation Osirian, despite the fact that he, at the time, used Osirans when producing the story. Pyramids of Mars is unfortunately a key player in the unit dating controversy, as it is the first time that Sarah Jane Smith's home time is said on screen, having previously been kept deliberately vague. She claims to come from the year 1980. However, this is directly contradicted in Peter Grimwade's script for Mordrin Undead, so either Pyramids of Mars or Mordrin Undead is responsible for the unit dating controversy. Take your pick, but that is a discussion for another time. Pyramids of Mars is one of only 2 stories to actually show the interior of the TARDIS during Season 13. A new set and console were constructed. However, despite Pyramids of Mars being recorded first and therefore being the first to feature the set in studio, it is actually the second to show the set on screen, with Planet of Evil being produced directly after, but broadcast first. The Hinchcliffe and Holmes partnership is distinctive in that many of their stories feature a light horror or romantic fiction basis for many of its narratives. Pyramids of Mars is no exception. Influences on Pyramids of Mars include the Mummy series of films by Universal Studios, but also King Tut's Curse. As I mentioned earlier, Paddy Russell also directed Horror of Fang Rock, and like that story, in Pyramids of Mars, everyone that the Doctor and Sarah meet dies. The only credited character that is not killed at any point in the story is Ahmed, one of the Egyptians that assists Marcus Scarman in breaking into my tomb. However, when novelizing the story, Terence Dix kills off Ahmed and his men as they run into Narmin's followers, making it a clean sweep. Surprisingly, this is the only story to depict Mars in the classic series. It has since been featured in The Christmas Invasion, Waters of Mars, and The Empress of Mars. It also featured in the Sarah Jane Adventures episodes The Vault of Secrets. However, in none of those stories is any reference made to pyramids on the surface. If you ask me, it's only a matter of time. Such is the popularity of Pyramids of Mars, it was chosen to represent the Fourth Doctor's era in BBC America's 50th anniversary, The Doctor's Revisited season. It was also broadcast along with the Doctor's Revisited accompanying documentary on the Watch channel in the United Kingdom. Prior to this, the story was also voted for by fans to represent the Fourth Doctor's era during UK Gold's Who at 40 season. The ratings for Pyramids of Mars are as follows. Episode 1 obtained 10.5 million viewers. Part 2 saw that figure rise to 11.3 million viewers. Part 3 saw the viewing figures drop to 9.4 million viewers. However, for Episode 4, 11.7 million viewers tuned in for the triumph of Sutekh. At least it would have been if circumstances had been more favourable. One of the main filming locations was Stargrove Hall in Berkshire, which still stands to this day. At the time, representing the old priory, the site on which Unit HQ was built was owned by Rolling Stones lead vocalist Mick Jagger. It has since changed hands. The location would be used again a couple of years later to represent a country house in the image of the Fendal. Like many Doctor Who stories, Pyramids of Mars is not flawless in its execution. Several production errors have been spotted over the years, starting with one of the most notorious. When I stand for the first time at the climax of Episode 4, a hand of a stagehand can be seen holding down the cushion on my chair. I have no idea who this individual is. He has since entered Doctor Who mythology as being the Hand of Sutekh. I must admit that at the time I was quite perturbed to find out that it had been there the entire time during my imprisonment. Fans of the Hand of Sutekh can now buy a custom-made cushion from the Redbubble store of former Doctor Who magazine editor Clayton Hickman. I personally have several just to remind myself of the good old days. The tie of Marcus Scarman changes repeatedly throughout the story. It is most noticeable in the jump from location to studio filming. Whilst there being several similar red and blue striped ties, they are undoubtedly different. It is also distinctly noticeable during the destruction of the Eye of Horus, as the picture crossfades from Marcus Scarman to my own beautiful and noble visage. The tie too changes and then reverts back. It is one of my more understated abilities. Talking of ties, the Doctor's is also not immune, as it too changes between scenes from orange to brown, but also in the way it is fastened. At the opening of Episode 3, one of the mummies that attacks the Doctor, Lawrence, and Sarah Jane Smith destroys Lawrence's radio telescope. However, in the very next scene, it is all in one piece. When Sarah Jane Smith returns to Doctor Who in the Series 2 episode School Reunion, a reference is made to Pyramids of Mars as she disputes with Rose Tyler about having seen mummies. I cheered when that happened. My understudy, Gabriel Wolfe, has reprised my role several times when I have been unavailable. One example is the DVD featurette titled Oh Mummy, which some have incorrectly interpreted as some kind of spoof, is in fact an accurate factual documentary. More recently, I featured as the main villain in the second box set of The New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield. And very soon I shall be returning to Big Finish to have my revenge on the Fourth Doctor in his audio range of adventures. That brings me to the end of this list of facts about Pyramids of Mars. I hope you have found it enjoyable. However, now you must excuse me, as I must shred the nervous systems of several people into 1,000,000 fibers. Yes, I'm having a party. Until we meet again, I am Sutekh the Destroyer, and where I tread I leave nothing but dust and darkness.